Thank you for coming on the Boxed Up Entrepreneur podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself to those who may not know you.
Hey, so my name is Jordan Apodaca, and I do a couple of different things right now. I serve at a restaurant that's just opening up here in Sacramento, California. I'm married. I've been almost 3 years now. And as far as the entrepreneur part of Boxed Up Entrepreneur, I have recently started a coaching business where I'm helping people develop confidence. And specifically, I'm helping entrepreneurs overcome any lack of confidence that they might have so that they can build their businesses and networks faster.
Okay. All right. So what made you want to get started into that?
Yeah, it started off by knowing that I wanted to coach first. So It wasn't specifically the idea of confidence. It wasn't specifically helping entrepreneurs. That was more me trying to figure out, okay, what am I actually good at, and applying my coaching into that field. But what made me want to coach is what's more interesting. And that's that I was working with a Christian ministry at a college campus here in Sacramento. And I'd been doing it for about 8 months, 9 months. And I just reached this point of recognizing that I really wasn't that good at it, frankly. I didn't have the skills to do it well. And I came back one day. I had just a rough day trying to do ministry. Then I went and I played Frisbee with some friends, and I just did awful that day at the game. I came back home and I just felt like crap. My physical body was just aching because I hadn't been taking care of my body either. So I just felt like a complete mess. Everything that I'd been trying to do had been failing. And so I took an ice bath because my body was so sore. And I'm like, dude, I just need some encouragement. So somehow the name Tony Robbins was in my head. I don't know where I had picked it up before, but I knew this guy was supposed to be some motivational speaker, help people kind of get out of ruts and stuff. So I go to my podcast app, I search for Tony Robbins, and I just scroll through, and I found one episode that thought they would kind of stand out. And it was him doing one of these interventions. If you don't know Tony Robbins, one of the most powerful things that he does is he'll put on these massive conferences. People will come and they have all kinds of issues. And there was this one guy who was just riddled with insecurity. He was a gym trainer who had lost 200 pounds himself. And yet every day he woke up and looked at himself in the mirror as if he still was that fat kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just didn't feel like he had what it took to actually provide the value that he needed to actually charge the money that he needed to. He was just completely stuck, completely insecure. And within 20 minutes, Tony Robbins took this guy from total lack of confidence to total certainty. And, it wasn't this rah-rah thing. It was getting to the heart of who he was, understanding his worth as a human being, recognizing that the high standards are great, but to be patient with yourself. And I just started sobbing as I listened to this while taking my ice bath. And I was just like, oh my goodness. First off, I needed to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally transformed that day. And then secondly, I knew I wanted to do whatever it was that he just did for this guy. I wanted to do that for other people as well.
Okay. And how long ago was this revelation for you?
This was about in January. So Not that long ago.
Not that long ago. Yeah. And we're in December now. When did you realize that this was like a legitimate business model that you could follow? Like you said you wanted to get into coaching, but then when did you realize that this was actually something that you could make money off of?
I was aware that coaching was a thing. I didn't really immediately make that connection of as a business model.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was, Gary Vee, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just double checking.
Just literally have his book right next to me. Literally right here.
That's awesome. So yeah, he has a Facebook group called First in Line. And as I just started listening to Tony Robbins, listening to Gary Vee, I heard about the Facebook group and I joined it. And there was one day where they do these. So Gary Vee talks about jab, 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 right hook. The idea of you want to just give value before you ask for something in return.
Mm-hmm.
And they have jab days in this Facebook group. And what that means is basically people just come in and they offer some type of service or gift of some sort for free. And there was this one guy, Phil Ellis. You should definitely check him out. Try to get him on the podcast. He would love to do it, I'm sure. Phil Ellis offers coaching for like small businesses and really helps take kind of one person shows and really multiply what they're doing. And he was offering just free general coaching. And I'm like, this sounds kind of cool. And it sounds like something I might like to do myself one day. So, and he was offering that free coaching. And so I'm like, hey, I took him up on it. And it was in that conversation that I realized it was both a really reliable business model and that it was something that I could begin trying to do right away. He helped me overcome the limiting belief that I had to get a certain number of credentials, a certain number of, I don't know. In my mind, I felt like I had to wait about a year and then go to some training and then really keep thinking about it and then develop a lengthy program. It's like, no, just go talk to people.
Literally
like
do
actually
it.
Practice it. So yeah, that's what I started doing. I did the same thing he did afterward. I just posted in that same Facebook group, hey, I'm getting started as a coach and I'd like to help people build some confidence for free. And so I started doing it. I've done that around 15 times or so. And I'm right now starting to move toward actually turning it into a business now. The first few were pretty rough, to be honest, but I think I really have my system down now. And I've seen some really encouraging results. And now I'm excited to really get running with it.
Okay. And so what practice methods did you use to kind of learn the techniques that you needed to learn?
Yeah. So studying NLP was huge.
Yeah.
NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And so I bought Tony Robbins' first book that he wrote, Unlimited Power. And he wrote that kind of in the heyday where neuro-linguistic programming was just being developed. Tony Robbins, Richard Bandler, John Grinder, these guys really, Richard Bandler began it, and Tony Robbins also helped kind of make it more mainstream in a lot of ways. And basically what the tool tries to help you understand is how to run your own mind. So the way that I like to think about it is, imagine there was some machine that dropped down from the heavens, and this machine had the power to instantly change how you feel, instantly change what you believe, and instantly change how you do things and how successful you are. But then imagine that this machine had no instructions whatsoever. And so we had to struggle for years and years, millennia even, to figure out how exactly it works. That's kind of how our own brains are. Our brains have the power to change how we feel, change how successful we are, and change even what we believe in a moment's notice. And yet most of us were never taught how to do it. And so what Richard Bandler did, he found people who were doing it well, doing those things already in psychology and other fields. And he just began to model what they were doing, figure out, okay, exactly what images are you forming in your mind? What sounds do you hear in your head? How do you talk to yourself when you do this? How do you hold your body? How do you breathe? And just down to the details of what people were doing. So I started just devouring NLP content that I could find online, in books. And then I started watching some of Tony Robbins and Richard Bandler's actually applying it. And then I started doing it myself. So those were the three. It was kind of studying, watching other people do it, and then doing it myself was how I developed those skills.
Yeah, and you said the first couple of times that you tried it, they didn't go so well, right?
Right.
Describe some of the failures and some of the things that you kind of learned in your first couple of attempts at coaching someone.
Yeah. The first lesson that I learned was to not over rely on a specific method.
Okay.
So someone came on and I basically knew 3 techniques at the time from NLP that were kind of designed to get you into a good, positive mental state and build confidence. And I'd been using those for myself, and I knew they worked. And so I thought all that I had to do was get him on a chat like this where I'm seeing him face to face and then guide him through them, and then things would be good to go. What I didn't appreciate was the fact that for me, when I listened to Tony Robbins that first time, he didn't just jump out into these mental exercises right away. He talked to the guy. Mm-hmm. He understood where he was. And this is key. He built rapport with him. Mm-hmm. That rapport is that connection that you feel where you're just kind of jiving and the conversation is flowing. And that was crucial. Like, if you're going to coach someone in a formal context or just talking to your friend and helping them get out of a tough spot that they're in, mm-hmm. there needs to be that connection. There needs to be trust, and learning how to build trust was huge. And I'd say the second thing that I learned was also kind of along the same lines. It was just flexibility in general, where sometimes I would try using a certain technique with someone and they didn't really understand it the first time, mm-hmm. I would just move on at first. I just be like, oh, I guess that one didn't work. Let me just try something else.
Right, okay.
Where I had one coaching session just last week, and the guy, he didn't speak very good English, and he had trouble with a lot of the concepts and terms I was using. So we would sometimes, with some of these mental exercises, it took us a solid 20 minutes to go through one of them that I do on myself in about 2 minutes. Mm. And so it was just trying to figure out, okay, this way of describing it isn't working for you, but you still have the same resources. And I think that's the fundamental assumption that you have to have, is that we all have the resources within us to make these changes. It's just our language, our map of the world, how we see things is so different that we have to be flexible enough to try to figure that out.
Yeah. And what do you think brings on these limiting beliefs in people? Because obviously what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people out of the state. But in order to get people out of the state, I almost feel like you have to understand why they're in that state to begin with. Am I correct in this?
Yes and no.
Okay.
One of the hallmark differences between what Richard Bandler, the founder of NLP, did versus what psychology at that time and still today was doing is psychology often tends to look into the past. And the assumption is if we can understand how this problem originated, mm-hmm. then we'll be able to overcome it. But just think for a second about what that might do for someone. So imagine you went through a traumatic experience when you were a child where somebody was physically harming you. And you're asking this person to come to you once a week and relive that experience every single week, mm-hmm. going back to it in your mind and thinking more and more and more about it. As you do that, the human brain's tendency, whenever you keep thinking about something over and over again, you kind of begin to just enlarge that image, and it ends up becoming larger than life. And you begin thinking, this is my problem. Like, this is this massive problem in my head. Whereas Richard Bandler, I've watched him coach people, and sometimes he'll tell them, like, don't even tell me what your problem is. I want you to picture it in your head, but we're going to eliminate that from constantly popping up in your mind, not keep dwelling on it. So the part where you are right is that it is extremely helpful. These negative beliefs often do originate from some time in our past with a specific event. And what a lot of people do is say they want to post something on social media, post a YouTube video, and they start to take the steps, or they start to even just think about taking the steps. But then immediately they'll hear some voice of being like, well, nobody will listen to that. Mm. And then they play some image almost subconsciously kind of in the back of their head of some time that they were laughed at or embarrassed in the past. And they say, I don't want to do that again. And so they just leave. Mm-hmm. They don't even try. And so what's really helpful is to figure out, okay, where is that voice coming from? There usually is an event in the past. There usually is something that's kind of triggering that. And if you can go back in their minds and have them kind of blur those out, shrink them down. So what I did with this one guy, it was really powerful. It was the same guy that I just mentioned who didn't speak the best English. And there's no problem with that, by the way.
Yeah.
It just made communication harder. But what I had him do was he was able to identify, there was this moment from when I was a kid that was just really awful. And so I told him, okay, you don't need to tell me what it was, but I want you to pull it up in your mind. Can you do that? And he said, yeah. Are you seeing what you saw then? And he said, yes. Are you feeling what you felt in your body? And he said, yes. Are you hearing what you heard? And he said, oh, yes, definitely. There's someone yelling at me. And so I told him, this isn't going to feel good at first, but make that yelling louder. And so he did. He felt it kind of get louder in his own head, turned it from like a 8 where it already was all the way up to a 10. And I said, how does that change how you feel? And he said, it makes me feel even worse. And I do that with people because I need them to know that they're the ones who are running the show. Mm-hmm. It's often easier to convince yourself, because we do it all the time, that just with your own head, you can make yourself feel awful. We do that with dreams, right? We have a dream and we're mad at someone in the dream and we wake up and we're still mad. But it was all just in our head that's determining how we feel. So then I had him turn the volume down. Said, okay, take it from a 10 now, put it down to a 4 or a 5, now down to a 3. And I asked him, does that make it feel a little bit less intimidating? And he said, yes, actually, it really does. Then I said, okay, change his voice to Mickey Mouse. And he started laughing at this point once he actually did it. And the point is you have to actually be imagining it. So this was a 20-minute process for us. You have to actually go through the steps of imagining it, hearing him or her, I don't know who it was, talking, saying this awful thing, but in this really silly voice. And then even shrinking them down, because this memory was from his childhood. And when you're a child, everyone looks giant, especially if it's a negative memory. So shrinking them down until they were half his height. And then this was the most powerful point, was having someone that he really respects and looks up to, and almost like this role model. At that point, I had him imagine that person walking into the room and picking him up as a child and walking him out of the house that he was in. And then I told him to imagine, what would your role model at this point have to say to you? And it was a really powerful experience for him. And what's so cool about it is that it was him doing the work. It was him changing. He was literally changing that memory. And when you change your memories, that can eliminate a lot of those negative beliefs that hold us trapped.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and how long do one of these sessions usually last?
Usually that was another problem that I found up front, is I was trying to do them too fast.
Okay.
Because I was wanting to be too much like Tony Robbins, and I had seen these videos where he did it in 20 minutes. For me at this point, it takes me about an hour to an hour and a half to really get to the root issue with people.
Okay, that's still not too terrible, all things considered.
No, and especially if you think of how much time you spend each day reliving painful memories and imagining awful things that haven't even happened. Just think of all of the free time that you'll have
right
after that. Think of all the fun stuff you could do if you stopped worrying and stopped regretting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Okay, and so something that people like Tony Robbins deal with a lot is people, I don't want to say, well, yeah, people doubt him simply because when you mention the word anxiety and depression, it seems like it's a big deal. And it 100% is, like 100% is. And I believe mental illness is very real. But I also believe that you can maybe not use the word fix it, but definitely enhance your quality of life with these practices. What do you have to say to the people that are like, well, you can't fix depression, I was born this way, like it's a neurological imbalance, it's a chemical imbalance, so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I would tell them is just to remember that our beliefs set the boundaries of what we can and can't experience. So if we tell ourselves that depression is impossible to overcome, then our mind tries to be efficient. Mm-hmm. Our body tries to be efficient. So it's not going to waste time trying to do something that you've already marked off as impossible. Mm-hmm. You've already added it to the list of programs that the computer of your mind is not allowed to run. Mm-hmm. And so if there's even a chance that depression, you can overcome it today, if there's even a chance, then you owe it to yourself to at least try. You owe it to yourself to open your view of the world to the possibility that there might be something miraculous that could happen. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that this is miraculous, but according to the person's current view of the world, right, it would kind of feel miraculous. And then the second thing that I would mention is that when it comes to depression, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to back pain, when it comes to all these different things, we all know that there are multiple components to it. Mm-hmm. There are physical components to depression. Everybody knows that the way that we move our body does affect the way that we feel mentally. People know that there is a chemical level to it. And so that's why people get prescriptions to help them with depression, because sometimes there are chemical imbalances. Mm-hmm. And we also know that there are psychological and mental causes of depression. And so the way that I would approach this is to say, I'm not going to try to help you figure out the chemical imbalances. I'm not qualified in the slightest to do that. And even when it comes to some of the psychological issues, especially if it involved a lot of trauma from the past, especially if it involved, if you believe that you need to fully understand all of the causes behind it in the past, I might not be the best person to help with that. But when it comes to one of the components, and that component is what you play in your mind every day, I can definitely help with that. Okay. Because at the end of the day, that's the final wall of defense. Mm. The reason that you feel the way that you feel right now is because of the sounds, images, and feelings that you run through your body. Like, that's kind of it. And so if you can change those, you can change how you feel. You can address them in multiple different ways, but this is a very direct way to get at them.
Okay. So I want to do a little experiment where I want you to treat me as if I were a client. Okay. And let's see what this is all about.
All right. We'll give it a go.
Yeah.
So I need you to, for the sake of this experiment, mm-hmm, are you going to be yourself, or are you going to be playing a character?
I'll be myself. I know I got some shit that I got to work on, so go ahead.
Sounds good. So in this context, I'm imagining that you've contacted me. Mm-hmm. And in this context, I'm imagining that you want some type of help. You perceive that there is some type of solution that I can help you with. So then my first question is, why did you schedule an appointment with me? What's going on?
Well, I'm struggling to deal with a relationship that kind of fell apart, and it's still kind of haunting me, still kind of lingering. And I can definitely see it affecting my day-to-day self.
Was this a romantic relationship or friendship or family?
Friendship.
Friendship? Mm-hmm. Someone in your kind of same peer group?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah.
Okay. How long ago was this?
About a year ago.
How long had you been friends up until then?
Like maybe 7 years.
Okay. And what if you were to think of that person right now and just kind of even just close your eyes for a second? If you close your eyes and you think of this person, is this person, like, what feelings, what are you seeing, what are you hearing, what are you feeling when you think of this person?
I feel a little bit of anger. I feel a little bit of, like, definitely like I miss this person, you know what I mean? But yeah, angry at this person at the same time.
Where do you feel those feelings?
Right in here. right in my chest, right in the middle of my chest.
And what direction are those emotions spinning? It could either be moving kind of forward in a circle, backwards, to the left, or to the right.
Definitely to the left.
Okay. When you think of this person, is there a specific image or event that comes to mind where you see either just them or maybe both of you in it?
Yes.
And are you seeing that out of your own eyes or from a third-person perspective?
From a third-person perspective.
Is it a still shot or is it like a movie?
It's like a scene that's kind of repeating over and over.
Do you hear anything?
Now I do.
Are you hearing them talk or are you hearing yourself talk or both?
Both.
Do you hear any internal dialogue about this person? Something you're not necessarily saying out loud in the memory, but you're kind of saying in your own head?
No, I'm just replaying what was said in this exchange, in this memory that I have.
So you're seeing this person and yourself from the third person perspective. The scene just keeps repeating, and you keep hearing what was said between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
Is it what was said that was so frustrating?
Yes.
All right, what I would like you to do for a second is notice that spinning in your chest, that anger, that frustration, and then also the disappointment, the missing them, that this is over. I want you to take that feeling and begin spinning it the opposite direction. And as you do this, I want you to think about the scene, and I want you to just take a little bit of a step back. So even though it's a third-person perspective, I imagine you're pretty close to it. I want you to kind of zoom out a little bit and see that interaction on the timeline of your life, on the timeline of your friendship. So this is just a little blip on the end of a 7-year friendship. And as you still hear the talking, just turn that volume down just a little bit. Turn it down, both your voice and his or her voice, and make that voice a little bit softer, not just in volume, but in tone. I imagine that the voices were probably not the friendliest voices. What would it sound like if the voice almost sounded comforting in a way? Even though what they said was wrong, they at least weren't so mad or angry or rude or manipulative or whatever that was when they said it. Remember to spin that feeling the opposite direction in your chest as it was. You're zooming out. And then what I want you to do now is take that scene and play it backwards. So start at the end and move to the beginning. Play it backwards. Even notice that it looks kind of funny. You might be walking backwards, or you might be making that kind of almost sounds like you're talking into a vacuum type of sound as the voices are on replay. And then do it faster. So play it on replay in reverse even faster this time. Now, I want you to remember, I want you to take a break from that for a second. You can still keep your eyes closed. I want you to remember something from your life that ended, but you're happy that it ended. Not necessarily because you wanted it to end, but you look back on it and you're still grateful for how it ended. Something like a graduation, something like moving a town, something like your friend moving away to a different state or something like that. And I want you to describe to me how that feels.
I'm proud of myself.
Proud of yourself? Where do you feel that sense of pride?
Same area, shoulders, chest, stomach.
So that's interesting. Notice that this feeling spreads a little bit further instead of staying isolated in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get that feeling spinning even a little bit faster?
Okay.
Kind of notice where it starts, notice where it ends, and then just loop it around, kind of snap it back faster. And then tell me, what are you imagining? Are you seeing, so when you're seeing something in this image, are you seeing it from a first person perspective or a third person?
Third person.
And is it bright or a dark image?
Bright.
Is it close or far away?
It's pretty close.
Does it have any type of frame around it, like maybe a black frame, or it's kind of located in a pretty set position?
It's located in a pretty set position.
And how would you describe where that position is?
What do you mean?
Does it almost feel like it's in a specific area, maybe even in your own brain? Some people store things, for example, that they're proud of, like on the front left side of their head.
Oh, I see. Kind of in the middle.
Okay. And are you hearing anything?
Yes.
And describe the tone of voice for me.
Also like full of pride, happy, excited.
Is this a still shot or is it like a scene repeating again?
This is more of a still shot, yeah, with the voices in the background almost. Or like overlaying this still image.
And what's one of the positive phrases that's being repeated over this still image?
Congratulations and good job.
Congratulations and good job. What I want you to do now is take the memory of you and your friend, and what you're going to do now is you get to choose what this memory, what this friendship means to you. And what I want you to do is not think about it as that one scene, but I want you to kind of take the whole friendship, that whole 7 years, and kind of put that into one still frame. In the same area, the middle of your head, where you feel the other memory. Kind of frame it the same way, see it the same way, make it bright. And I want you to pick an image that's going to represent this friendship. So think of your friendship. Think of, how do you want to remember this friend? You are in control.
Okay.
Now feel the same feelings of pride going through your shoulders, chest, and stomach.
Yep.
Now hear yourself overlay audio onto that message, onto that image. Congratulations. Good job. This was a pretty freaking amazing friendship.
Yeah.
So tell me, what does this friendship mean to you?
It meant a lot. It meant, having somebody there.
What does it mean to you? Not meant. What does it mean now?
Mean now?
Yeah.
Just almost like a learning experience. Almost like, I don't really know how to describe what it feels like. It feels...
Would you...
Go ahead.
Be able to feel proud of yourself for how you conducted yourself in that friendship?
For the most part, yeah.
Why just for the most part?
I mean, obviously there's, there were some things that went both ways, with me not necessarily being the best of friends at certain times.
When I asked you to think of this other thing that ended well and you felt proud about, did you do that perfectly?
No.
No. And yet, it was still a positive memory and experience for everyone involved, right?
Yeah.
And so what it sounds like to me is you're placing higher standards for this one area of your life, demanding perfection here when you didn't demand it in other areas. And really, I think it's because you love this person so much. And there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Right. But with all good things, it's our expectations that really can screw us up in the end, right? It's the expectation that this friendship has to be permanent, when perhaps its purpose in your life was more temporary in nature. I freaking loved being in college, but I'm so glad that I'm not still in college. It's temporary. Some gifts are just designed to be temporary. And you guys were such good friends that in order for you to both be able to keep growing, I think it took a more violent rupture for you guys to be able to both go your separate ways. And I don't know about this other person, how they've chosen to respond to it, but I know about you, and I fully believe that you have the resources and capacity, and that you've already begun taking the steps to keep learning from it, keep growing.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that was an interesting way of feeling. That was an interesting way of like manipulating my own body. That felt strange.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's one more thing though, that if you were my client, I would strongly suggest / force you to do.
Okay.
And that is, I think that you should strongly consider reaching out to this person and apologizing for the negative emotions that you've felt toward them pretty consistently for the past year, and tell them that you're thankful for the friendship that they offered you, and just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm going to have.
I'm
going to do. Yeah, I mean, I think I can do that.
Because really, I mean, forgiveness and telling people that we're sorry, oftentimes that's why we have the negative emotions in the first place. I think that our emotions are there to send us messages, and the message of frustration and missing someone often tell us that there's just something that left that needs to be said.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. You did good.
That was you did really good. That was interesting. That was wild to say the least. I don't know. It's a weird sensation that you feel in your body, especially when you have someone like guiding you through it. It's cool. All right, so talk to me.
And that's where I want to develop a number of just audio recordings of me guiding someone through it.
Yeah.
But man, it's so much more powerful when it can be personalized and in the moment and making changes on the fly. So
yeah. Okay.
That's why I think that at the end of the day, some coaches, they teach stuff that they should really just turn into an online course and sell it that way. But with this type of coaching, like, I don't know how else to really do that except for one-on-one, you know?
One-on-one. Yeah. All right. So talk to me about what you just did with me. Talk to me about like the process that you kind of just went through and why you did what you did. Like, what was the point of everything?
Yeah, this is really good interview, by the way. You're asking great questions.
Thank you.
You're not just moving on to the next point because you have another point. You're analyzing things. It's really good. So first off, what I did was I wanted you to just describe what the issue is. Most of the time, people know what their problem is if they're willing to hop on a call. In real life, it's not always that easy. People usually don't already have one figured out. But that's what's really helpful for me as a coach, is that people have already done half the work for me by identifying some issue. So that's helpful. And so I'm just letting you tell me what you already know. And then I sometimes begin, then I do two things, and I can do it in either order. But I try to figure out your mental strategies for two different sets of feelings. So what I did was I figured out your mental strategy for feeling frustration and missing someone. And I was writing some of that down. That was seeing it from the third person. That was the scene repeating. That was both of you talking, and all that intensity, the feeling in the chest, spinning a specific direction. If you were to think over other times that you have felt that same type of anger and missing someone, I can guarantee you that a lot of those elements would be there. Maybe not every one, but probably about 90% of them would be the same. So I had to figure out what that strategy was, and then begin to soften it. This isn't where the main healing happens, but this kind of is clearing the path. So I tried to soften that by having you spin it the other direction, by having you minimize the sounds, by having you step back even further. And then, so that's kind of step one. Step two then was trying to figure out your strategy for when you feel good about events from the past being over, which is a pretty specific feeling. And so it was some type of thing that you graduated or moved on from, and figured out those strategies, what you were feeling in your body. And it sounds to me like for you, the physical feeling it in your chest and stuff was one of the most profound things, maybe because that's just how you feel things. I know for me, I feel things a lot in my head. For you, it sounds like it's mainly in your chest. And maybe you've just never noticed that before, or maybe that's just kind of one of the primary ways that you experience reality is through those kind of chest gut feelings. But anyway, so noticing that, noticing the language, noticing the fact that it was a still image. And then what I did was just take the one memory and then overlay the strategies from the good memory over the negative memory. Does that make sense?
Yes. So like the way my body is reacting, you wanted to put that bodily motion almost on top of the memory that I had that was the negative memory.
Yeah, and framing that memory the same way you framed positive memories.
Okay.
And then beyond that, it was a little bit of freestyling, of asking you to kind of take control of the friendship, see the whole timeline at once, form one image. I'd never really done that before, but that was just me kind of thinking on the spot of what makes sense to say here, telling you to choose how you want, what you want this memory to mean. Yeah. So that's basically what I did.
Wow, that was really cool. And if someone were more interested in these techniques and stuff like that, what do you recommend people dive into? both in a sense where people want to potentially pursue something like this, and in a sense where people want to maybe incorporate it into their own being. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, so one option would be to just sign up for a coaching session with me. Like, that'd be a very direct way to begin learning these things.
Right.
If you want to study it on your own, the same way I've studied stuff on my own and begun working on this, I think Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power really is a great place to start. He has a great chapter on submodalities, and that chapter alone is worth the cost of the book. The rest of the stuff is great, but submodalities are those things like, are you seeing it from the third person or the first person? Is the sound quality high pitch or low pitch? And he has probably about this one page with like 50 different distinctions for how someone can form these mental movies in their mind. And so learning how to master those really is key. And so if you just want like a practice that you can do, is what I sometimes do at the beginning of the day is I just think through, okay, what am I anxious about today? What am I kind of feeling in my body and my mind, just this anxiety about, this uneasiness about? Or even at the end of the day, what from today am I kind of still uncomfortable with? It feels like it's just not processing right. Then you just pause for a second. You notice it, you're aware of it, then you pause. And I usually just close my eyes and I begin to pull up that movie, which has been running kind of in the back of my head, more unconsciously, making me feel anxious. And I bring it up to the front of the screen so I can see, okay, what is this movie that keeps playing? And then I just begin tweaking with the way that the movie is running. I'm the one who's in charge of that movie. So if I'm picturing all of the work that I have to do for the day, and that's making me feel stressed out because I've overcommitted to a bunch of different things, I might see a piece of paper that looks something like this. It's full of to-do lists on it. And that starts stressing me out. Well, I can do a bunch of different things. For one thing, I can push that to-do list just out into the distance and watch it shrink until it disappears. Or I can see myself checking off each of them really quickly and kind of encouraging myself, even though there's a lot here, I can get them all done. Or I can picture myself tearing that page out and then writing down 3 things that I need to do on a separate page and just simplifying it. So this is all mental work. This isn't something that you can just hear me tell you to do and it makes a difference. This is something that you need to actually take the 1 to 5 minutes that's required to actually rewire how your brain is processing information. And that will change how you feel.
Wow. That's awesome. You sound like you definitely know what you're doing, man. It sounds like you got some pretty great things ahead of you. That was awesome.
Dude, thank you. Yeah, I sort of know what I'm doing. I've been
obsessing
over this content for the last year now, just studying it relentlessly. So
where do you see yourself with this in 5 years?
Doing it full time.
Okay.
Like I said, right now I'm still serving as I'm getting this going. I see myself doing this full time. I see myself potentially taking on a job within the Tony Robbins industry, whatever the organization is technically called, as one of their coaches.
Yes. I want to talk about real quick. You had an amazing thing happen to you via TikTok. You mentioned it in one of your videos. Yes. So let's talk about that real quick because I definitely want to get through that.
Yeah, so this is super cool. This is just an example of how doing good things with almost no intention of receiving from it, just putting out good content, can really end up benefiting you. So on TikTok, the reason I was on TikTok, and some of you may not even know what that is, but it's a social media platform with a bunch of 1 minute or less videos. You just scroll through it, kind of like Vine, but better, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
So I got on there because Gary Vee was telling everybody, listen, this is the best place to grow right now. If you want to produce videos, just go on there, and way more exposure than anywhere else. So I'm like, okay, I'll try it. I'd been on Instagram and podcasting and other places and seeing some slow growth, but I'd be happy for some faster growth. So I started making some videos about Tony Robbins and some clips of him interacting with people and me kind of explaining them. One of those got, within the first few days, 200,000 views. Now it's at 400,000.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. And so I made a few more videos about Tony Robbins. TikTok, the algorithm began to catch on to the fact that I'm interested in Tony Robbins. All of a sudden I see this video, this lady, she ends up actually being the same age as me, but she is breaking down some time management system that Tony Robbins teaches in one of her videos. And so I'm like, no way, another video about Tony Robbins. Like, it's pretty rare on TikTok. Most of it at this point is kind of silly stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I went to her profile, I went to her Instagram, and I found out that she actually is she's a speaker for Tony Robbins. And so she's not just like some random staff member who helps clean up or organize events or whatever, but she goes into towns. Her job is really cool. She travels into cities 3 months before Tony Robbins gets there, and it's basically like the hype girl is how she describes it for herself. Mm-hmm. Gets everything going, does some initial trainings, and so that's what she does. And so I just asked her, hey, you want to come on my podcast? That was all that I intended to receive from it, was just a podcast interview. So we had the podcast interview. It was awesome. I haven't put it up yet, but you should definitely check that out at some point because she was just a really cool lady. Her name's Carissa. And then after that finished, she had talked about how she had gotten this job with no previous experience working for Tony Robbins. So she didn't kind of start from the bottom and work her way up. She just went straight for one of these top positions. So that got me thinking, like, I need to go after stuff more and not just wait around expecting stuff to happen to me. I need to build my own life. And so once that was over, I was thinking I need to ask her something big. Like, I need to ask a favor from her. And I was trying to think of what could she actually help me with. Mm-hmm. And so I asked her, like, hey, would you be able to get me, this is exactly what I said. Would you be able to get me a new best friends discount for the upcoming event in San Jose? And she said, yeah. So I got a ticket that was normally going to be like $1,200 for $600.
Wow.
And I'm going to go there. I'm going to do the whole firewalk experience, which I know some people think is really corny, but I think it's pretty awesome. I'm excited for it.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. Using the platforms to build connections, work your way up.
Yes.
So you're going to is this the first Tony Robbins event you're going to attend?
Yeah, it will be the first. And it's pretty cool because it'll be about just a little over a year since I first started listening to his content. I also asked Carissa, like, okay, what's the best way if I did want to be a coach for Tony Robbins, like be one of his top recommended coaches, what should I do? And she said the very first thing is go to this event and just talk to everybody. Master the stuff. And she said, get yourself to the point where when you walk into the room, like it's obvious that you belong there, that you're supposed to be part of the team. And so that's just having me go back through his content even more, practice it even more. I'm trying to, they say that success leaves clues. And I really do want to be able to help people the way Tony Robbins helps people. It's not about the fame, though that'd be kind of fun. But it's really about those one-on-one interactions where he's able to just totally impact someone. And so I'm trying to follow the model, the blueprint of what he did. And he said that during his 20s, which I'm in my 20s now, he just did a bunch of one-on-one coaching with absolutely anybody who would listen. Then in his 30s, he transitioned to doing a lot more of like small group coaching. And then in his 40s and beyond is when he kind of launched off into doing giant conferences. And that's when his businesses really took off as well. And so that's what I'm trying to model. So now I've got 5 years left in my 20s, and I just want to master the art of one-on-one coaching with people.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. I think we're going to wrap it up here. We've been on for almost an hour. Thank you, Jordan, so much for taking time out of your day to do this with me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of on the spot asking you to perform your magic for me and you killing it. So that was awesome. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And we'll stay in contact. Good luck to you with everything. I definitely want to hear about how that conference or how that event went. So we'll stay in contact.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. Have a nice rest of your day.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.